In the pristine lobby of the Grand Azure Hotel, where crystal chandeliers cast judgment on those deemed unworthy, Eliza Matthews stood her ground. The millionaire tech mogul leaned across her reception desk, his voice dripping with disdain as he declared, "You don't belong behind this desk," never suspecting that her response would leave him speechless and forever change the power dynamic between them. What single sentence could a mere receptionist possibly say that would silence one of the most powerful men in the city? Eliza had been at the Grand Azure for exactly 3 months when James Callaway stormed into her life. The hotel, with its marble columns and gold-leafed moldings, catered to those who considered 5-star service a birthright. She had learned to smile through condescension, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, and to remain invisible unless needed. But invisibility, Eliza was about to discover, could be its own kind of power. Eliza arrived at 5:30 a.m. each morning, 1 hour before her shift officially began. These quiet moments belonged to her alone, when the Grand Azure's lobby held only the whispers of night giving way to dawn. She would trace her fingers along the polished marble countertop, mentally rehearsing the day's reservations and special requests. "You're early again," said Marcus, the night manager, his eyes heavy with the weight of his shift. "They don't pay you for this, you know." "I know," Eliza replied, already reviewing the night's incident reports. "But I like to be prepared." What she didn't say was that preparation was her shield. In her 3 months at the Grand Azure, Eliza had memorized the preferences of every regular guest. Mr. Harrington's extra pillows, Mrs. Clement's allergy to lilies, the Zhuang family's need for adjoining rooms. Knowledge was currency in this world, and she collected it meticulously. By 6:25 a.m., Eliza had already handled 2 early checkouts, rearranged the floral arrangements that clashed with the new lobby furniture, and spotted a potential overbooking. That would have caused chaos later that day. "I don't know how you caught that," said Sarah, her supervisor, scanning the reservation system. "That would have been a nightmare." Eliza smiled politely, just paying attention. What she didn't mention was her previous experience managing complex scheduling systems for a multinational corporation. That life seemed distant now, like a book she had read about someone else. The lobby began filling with the morning's departures. Businessmen in tailored suits barely glanced her way as she processed their checkouts. Wealthy tourists handed over room keys with distracted nods. She was furniture to them, functional and necessary, but ultimately forgettable. "Room 712 complained about the temperature again," whispered Carlos, the concierge. "Said they might take their business elsewhere next time." "I'll send up maintenance with a bottle of champagne," Eliza replied, already drafting a personalized apology note in her head. By mid-afternoon, her feet ached and her cheeks hurt from smiling, but her posture never faltered. The Grand Azure demanded perfection, and Eliza delivered it with mechanical precision. Yet behind her practiced efficiency lay an analytical mind that never stopped working, assessing, calculating. "You're good at this," remarked an elderly guest, as Eliza helped her arrange transportation to the opera. "But something tells me you could be running this place if you wanted to." Eliza's smile flickered for just a moment. "That's very kind of you to say." The woman patted her hand. "My dear, I ran a company for 40 years. I recognize capability when I see it, even when it's trying to hide." As the woman walked away, Eliza felt momentarily exposed, as if someone had peered through her carefully constructed facade. She straightened the already immaculate counter and glanced at the antique clock in the lobby. 4 more hours until her shift ended. 4 more hours of being invisible. 4 more hours of being underestimated. 4 more hours until she could return to her small apartment and be herself again. Whoever that was now. Little did she know that in less than 24 hours, James Callaway would arrive and shatter the careful equilibrium of her world. "Callaway." Sarah whispered the name as if it were a curse. The morning staff meeting had fallen silent, the usual chatter replaced by nervous glances. "James Callaway is arriving tomorrow." Eliza scanned the reservation notes on her tablet. "The tech billionaire? 3-night stay, presidential suite." "Not just any tech billionaire," Carlos interjected. "The James Callaway, founder of Callaway. Innovations, Worth about 30 billion, give or take a few hundred million depending on the stock market's mood. Sarah nodded grimly. And the most demanding guest you'll ever encounter. He's made 5 hotel managers cry. Actually cry. With real tears. The room filled with murmurs as staff exchanged stories they'd heard about Callaway. How he'd once had a housekeeper fired for placing a water glass on the wrong side of the sink. How he measured the temperature of his coffee with a digital thermometer and sent it back if it was 1 degree off. How he spoke to service staff as if they were malfunctioning, algorithms in need of deletion. His last visit was before your time, Eliza, Sarah continued. He requested a specific thread count for his sheets that we didn't have, so we had to source them overnight from Milan. Cost the hotel thousands. Eliza made a note. And do we have those sheets now? In storage, never used since. Along with the specific mineral water he drinks, the Japanese charcoal air purifiers he requires, and the particular brand of toiletries he uses. As the meeting dispersed, Eliza remained seated, studying Callaway's extensive preference list. 26 items, each more specific than the last. The presidential suite would need to be completely reconfigured, the minibar restocked with precise brands, even the lighting adjusted to his specifications. Worried? Carlos asked, lingering by her chair. No, Eliza replied, still scrolling through the list. Just planning. You should be worried. Last time he was here, he made Diane from reservations question her entire career choice. Eliza finally looked up. What exactly happened? He asked her a question about quarterly hotel occupancy trends compared to market competition. When she couldn't answer, he suggested she find work better suited to her limited analytical capabilities. She transferred to another hotel the next week. That evening, Eliza stayed 3 hours after her shift ended. She researched James Callaway meticulously, reading interviews, watching videos of his keynote speeches, even studying photographs of his homes featured in architectural magazines to understand his aesthetic preferences. She learned he was 42, never married, had built his company from a dorm room project to a tech giant within a decade. His management style was described as brutally efficient. His public persona was calculating, cold, brilliant. By midnight, Eliza had drafted a complete protocol for his stay, with contingency plans for every possible scenario. She emailed it to the entire staff, along with a newly organized preference sheet categorized by department responsibility. This is impressive, Sarah texted back almost immediately. But why go to all this trouble? Eliza didn't respond. She couldn't explain that this kind of analysis was once her daily work, that breaking down complex problems into solvable units was second nature to her, or that something about Callaway's reputation had triggered a familiar feeling of challenge she hadn't felt in years. As she finally left the empty hotel lobby, the night manager watched her with newfound curiosity. Be careful, he called after. Hurry, people like Callaway don't see people like us. We're just functions to them. Eliza nodded and stepped into the cool night air. I know exactly what people like Callaway see, she whispered to herself. That's why I'm ready for him. That night, sleep eluded Eliza. In her modest studio apartment, she sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by the ghosts of her former life. She had opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, something she rarely allowed herself to do. Inside lay the remnants of Eliza Matthews, MBA candidate at Wharton, rising star at Meridian Consulting, a leather portfolio with her initials, business cards she never had the chance to use, a half-finished thesis on emerging market strategies that had once been her pride. 5 years ago, Eliza had been on a different trajectory entirely. She had graduated summa cum laude from Cornell with dual degrees in economics and business administration, landed a coveted internship at Meridian, and been accepted to Wharton's prestigious MBA program with a partial scholarship. You're going places, Matthews, her mentor at Meridian had told her. I see a corner office in your future. The photographs told the story of that other Eliza, her in a sharp blazer, presenting to a boardroom of executives, her shaking hands with the CEO after winning the annual Innovation Challenge, her surrounded by smiling classmates at Wharton orientation, their futures stretched before them like an unwritten tale of success. Eliza picked up the acceptance letter from Wharton, now creased from the many times she had folded and unfolded it over the years. "We are pleased to inform you." She couldn't bring herself to read further. She knew what came next. The sudden illness of her mother back in rural Pennsylvania, the mounting medical bills, the impossible choice between her future and her family. Eliza had chosen family without hesitation, withdrawing from Wharton with promises to return that never materialized. She had worked remotely for Meridian as long as she could, caring for her mother between conference calls and strategy sessions. But as her mother's condition worsened, even that became impossible. She took a leave of absence that gradually, silently, transformed into a resignation. Her promising career evaporated as hospital visits and insurance battles consumed her days. After her mother passed, Eliza found herself adrift. Meridian had long since filled her position. Wharton's deferment period had expired. At 32, she had started over, taking whatever jobs would pay the bills, slowly working her way back toward some semblance of professional stability. The Grand Azure wasn't what she had dreamed of, but it was something, a step, a place to catch her breath and rebuild. Eliza carefully returned each item to the drawer except for one. Her final performance review from Meridian, with its glowing assessments and predictions of her bright future. She placed it on her nightstand as a reminder. Exceptional analytical skills, remarkable ability to identify inefficiencies, natural talent for strategic planning. These words had once defined her. Perhaps, somewhere beneath the polite smiles and perfect posture of the hotel receptionist, they still did. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Callaway arrives at 2 p.m. tomorrow. GM wants you at the front desk when he checks in." Eliza typed back a simple, "I'll be ready," before turning off her light. As she drifted toward sleep, her mind calculated probabilities and mapped contingencies, just as it had when she was preparing market entry strategies for multinational corporations. Only now, she was planning for a billionaire's whims rather than business expansions. "I'll be ready," she repeated to the darkness, a quiet determination hardening within her. James Callaway might see only a hotel receptionist tomorrow, but she would see him exactly for what he was, a problem to be solved, a challenge to be met, a man who had never had to look closely at the people he considered beneath him. For the first time in years, Eliza felt a flicker of the person she used to be, the person who never backed down from a challenge. At precisely 1:45 p.m., the Grand Azure transformed into a stage set for a royal arrival. The general manager, Mr. Winters, rarely seen outside his office, paced the lobby in his finest suit. Housekeeping performed a final inspection of the presidential suite, while the kitchen prepared Callaway's welcome amenity, a specific arrangement of imported fruits and artisanal cheeses. "He's early," hissed the doorman through his radio. "Black. Maybach pulling up now." A ripple of panic swept through the staff. Eliza alone remained composed, her posture perfect as she stood behind the reception desk. She had arrived at 6 a.m. to personally oversee every detail of the preparation. "Remember," Mr. Winters whispered urgently to the assembled staff, "anticipate his needs before he expresses them. Do not speak unless spoken to. And above all, do not—" The revolving door began to turn, cutting off his instructions. First came two assistants, both young men with identical haircuts and smart tablets clutched like shields. Then a security detail, scanning the lobby with practiced efficiency. And finally, James Callaway himself. He was taller than Eliza had expected from his photographs, dressed in a simple black sweater and tailored trousers that probably cost more than her monthly rent. No tie, no flash, nothing to announce his wealth except the quiet confidence of a man who never needed to prove himself to anyone. "Mr. Callaway." Mr. Winters stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "Welcome back to the Grand Azure." Callaway shook his hand without breaking stride. The traffic from the airport was inefficient. "You should suggest alternative routes to your guests." "Of course, sir." "Absolutely right." Eliza observed how quickly Mr. Winters, normally imperious with his staff, transformed into a nodding supplicant. Callaway's entourage spread throughout the lobby, his assistants already tapping furiously on their tablets. "Your suite is ready, sir," Mr. Winters continued, gesturing toward Eliza. We've implemented all your preferences exactly as requested. Callaway approached the desk, his eyes, not on Eliza, but on his phone. One of his assistants handed her a folder. Mr. Callaway's identification and payment details, the young man said. Process it quickly, please. Eliza accepted the folder with a professional smile. Thank you, Mr. Callaway. Welcome to the Grand Azure. I've personally overseen the preparation of your suite. You'll find the Yamazaki mineral water chilled to exactly 8 degrees Celsius. The blackout curtains have been triple-checked, and the specific hypoallergenic pillows you requested are in place. For the first time, Callaway looked directly at her. His eyes were startlingly intelligent, assessing her with the swift calculation of a man accustomed to processing information rapidly. You're new, he stated. Not a question. I've been with the Grand Azure for 3 months, sir. He nodded once, apparently satisfied with the efficiency of her response. The suite has been tested for ambient noise levels? Yes, sir. Below 30 decibels as specified. I've also taken the liberty, preparing a schedule of the hotel's quietest hours, should you need to conduct important calls. Something flickered across his face, perhaps surprise at her thoroughness. He glanced at her name tag. Eliza Matthews. Yes, sir. The room key? She presented the key card in its leather folder, along with a printed overview of his stay that she had prepared. Your itinerary, as provided by your office, with hotel services matched to your schedule. He took the items without comment and turned toward the elevators, his entourage falling in behind him. Mr. Winters exhaled loudly once. The elevator doors closed. Well done, everyone. Especially you, Eliza. That was surprisingly smooth. Eliza nodded, already turning her attention to the next guest in line. But inside, a strange sensation had taken root. For the briefest moment, when Callaway had looked at her, really looked at her, she had felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She had felt seen. He made her cry right there in the hallway. Carlos whispered during their break in the staff room. Just reduced her to tears because she knocked on his door twice instead of once. The morning after Callaway's arrival, the hotel staff huddled, together exchanging stories like survivors of a natural disaster. Eliza sipped her tea, listening. That was during his stay last year, Sarah confirmed. Melissa from housekeeping. She's working at the Hilton now. And remember Thomas from room service? Added Miguel, a bellhop. Callaway complained that his breakfast tray was positioned 2 inches off center on the table, had him written up. Eliza remained quiet, cataloging each anecdote, each warning. Callaway had been at the Grand Azure for less than 24 hours, and already the atmosphere had changed. Staff spoke in hushed tones. Managers appeared randomly on floors they rarely visited, checking and double-checking details. He requested you specifically this morning, Sarah told Eliza, her expression caught between concern and curiosity. Asked for the competent one at the front desk when he called down. A ripple of surprise moved through the group. Being singled out by Callaway was rarely positive. What did he want? Carlos asked. Information about local restaurants, Eliza replied. I sent up a curated list with private dining options and the names of each executive chef. And nothing. He said adequate and hung up. Carlos laughed. From Callaway, that's practically a marriage proposal. As their break ended, Maria from housekeeping caught Eliza's arm. Maria was in her 50s, a 20-year veteran of the hotel industry with tired eyes and calloused hands. Be careful with that one, she said quietly. Men like him, they see people like us as furniture, till the furniture displeases them, then they break it. I'll be careful, Eliza promised. No, you listen to me. Maria's grip tightened. 3 years ago, he was staying at the Waldorf. My cousin worked there. A concierge named David made a small mistake with a dinner reservation. Just a small mistake. Callaway didn't yell. He didn't complain. He made a phone call. 2 days later, David was fired. Eliza felt a chill. For a reservation error? Callaway owns stock in the hotel's parent company. One call to the right person, and poof, someone's livelihood is gone. He doesn't get angry. He erases people. The warning followed Eliza throughout her shift. She moved through the lobby with heightened awareness, handling check-ins and inquiries with her usual efficiency. But part of her remained alert for Callaway's return. He appeared shortly before 4 p.m., striding through the revolving door with one assistant trailing behind him. Eliza watched his approach in the reflection of her computer screen, noting his purposeful gait, the way other guests instinctively moved aside. "Ms. Matthews," he said, stopping at her desk. "Mr. Callaway, how may I assist you? Your restaurant recommendations were satisfactory. Now I need a meeting space for tomorrow morning. 6 people, video conferencing capabilities, absolute privacy." Eliza's fingers moved across her keyboard. "Our Sapphire room is available. It has a dedicated entrance, state-of-the-art video systems, and soundproofed walls. The catering options? I'll have a menu sent to your suite within the hour, customized to the dietary preferences on file for your executive team." Callaway studied her for a moment. "You have that information?" "Yes, sir. It was in the briefing your office sent last week. Your COO is gluten-free, your CFO avoids caffeine, and your head of product development is vegan." Another pause. Then, "The meeting is at 8 a.m. I'll expect you there at 7:30 to ensure everything is properly arranged." It wasn't a request. It was barely even a statement. It was simply his reality, in which hotel staff existed to bend to his will. "Of course, Mr. Callaway." As he walked away, Eliza caught Maria watching from across the lobby, her expression one of unmistakable concern. Be careful with that one. But careful wasn't in Eliza's nature. Thorough, yes, precise, always. But the woman she had been before, the one who had nearly conquered Wharton and Meridian, had never been careful. She had been brilliant. And somewhere inside the hotel receptionist, that woman was waking up. The call came at 11:42 p.m., long after Eliza's shift had ended. She was still awake, reviewing hotel occupancy reports on her laptop, a habit from her consulting days she couldn't seem to break. "Ms. Matthews, this is James Callaway." Eliza sat up straighter, though he couldn't see her. "Mr. Callaway, how can I help you?" "I'm told you're not on duty." "No, sir. My shift ended at 6. A pause. "Yet you answered. The night manager forwarded your call to me. He mentioned you asked for me specifically." Another pause. Longer this time. She could hear typing in the background. The faint murmur of a television. "I have an urgent situation. My team has prepared an inadequate presentation for tomorrow's meeting. The financial projections are formatted incorrectly, and the executive summary lacks crucial context." Eliza waited, uncertain where this was leading. "My assistants are occupied with other matters. The hotel business center is closed. I require someone with basic competence in financial documents and presentation software." The implication hung. In the silence, Eliza glanced at the clock. 11:44 p.m. "I can come in to assist you, Mr. Callaway. Would 30 minutes be acceptable? 20 would be better." The line went dead. Eliza changed quickly into a simple black dress and blazer, applied minimal makeup, and caught a ride share to the hotel. 19 minutes later, she knocked softly on the door of the presidential suite. One of Callaway's assistants opened it, looking exhausted. "Thank God," he muttered. "He's in the study." The presidential suite sprawled across the top floor of the Grand Azure, a palatial expanse of marble and luxury. Eliza followed the assistant through rooms larger than her entire apartment, noting the evidence of Callaway's exacting standards. The precisely arranged fruit platter, untouched, the thermometer beside the water pitcher, the air purifiers humming in each corner. The study was dominated by a massive desk covered in papers and laptops. Callaway sat in the center of the chaos, his attention fixed on 3 screens simultaneously. "You're 2 minutes early," he said without looking up. "Good. The files are there." He gestured to a laptop. Eliza sat down and began reviewing the documents. A complex financial presentation for potential investors, filled with projection models and market analyses. The kind of work she had once done daily at Meridian. "What specifically needs correction?" she asked. "Everything on slides 14 through 22. The formatting is inconsistent, the charts don't reflect the correct growth potential, and the executive summary lacks persuasive context." Eliza nodded and began working. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced ease. reformatting tables, adjusting formulas, restructuring content. The work was familiar, almost comforting in its complexity. Callaway continued his own work, occasionally glancing at her progress. Neither spoke. The only sounds were the click of keyboards and the distant hum of the city below. After 40 minutes, Eliza looked up. "I've reformatted the financial projections and restructured the executive summary to emphasize key differentiation. Points. Would you like to review?" Callaway moved to stand behind her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. He scanned through her work with the swift efficiency she had come to expect from him. "You've adjusted the growth projections," he noted. "Why?" "The original formula didn't account for seasonal variance in your industry. I used a weighted average based on the past 3 years of quarterly reports." He looked at her sharply. "How? Do you know about quarterly fluctuations in tech manufacturing?" Eliza hesitated, then answered carefully. "I have some background in business analysis." "Some background," he repeated, studying the complex model she had created. "Where did you learn to do this level of financial modeling?" "I picked things up here and there," she replied, deliberately vague. Callaway returned to his seat without further comment, but she felt his gaze return to her periodically as she completed the remaining slides. When she finished, he reviewed the entire presentation. In silence. "This will suffice," he finally said, which she was beginning to recognize as his highest form of praise. Then, almost as an afterthought, "You're wasted at that front desk." Before she could respond, he had already turned away, dismissing her, as efficiently as he had summoned her. As the assistant showed her out, he whispered, "I've never seen him accept someone else's work without tearing it apart." "What did you do?" "My job," Eliza replied simply, though they both knew that reformatting complex financial presentations at midnight was far beyond a hotel receptionist's job description. Walking through the quiet lobby toward the exit, Eliza felt strangely energized. For the first time in years, she had used her real skills, flexed her real muscles. It was like discovering she could still speak a language she thought she had forgotten, and someone had noticed. The Sapphire Room hummed with the quiet energy of power and money. Eliza had arrived at 7:15 a.m., 15 minutes before even Callaway's requested early time, to ensure everything was flawless. The catering had been arranged precisely according to the dietary restrictions she had memorized. The temperature was set to exactly 70 degrees. The presentation she had helped reformat the night before waited on the main screen, ready to impress. As Callaway's team filed in, Eliza stood unobtrusively near the door, prepared to address any last-minute needs before slipping away. They barely glanced at her, these titans of industry in their tailored suits discussing market shares and acquisition strategies as casually as others might discuss the weather. "Eliza? Eliza Matthews?" The voice cut through the ambient conversation. Sharp with surprise, Eliza turned to find herself face to face with a ghost from her past. Alex. His name escaped her lips before she could stop it. Alexander Chen, impeccably dressed in a custom suit that screamed success, stared at her with undisguised shock. They had been classmates at Wharton, both on the fast track to brilliant careers. Now he was here, apparently one of Callaway's executives. "It is you," he said, recovering slightly. "Wow, it's been, 5 years? Something like that," Eliza replied, acutely aware of her hotel uniform, the polite smile she had perfected for guests. "I always wondered what happened to you. You just disappeared after first semester." His gaze traveled to her name tag, confusion evident. "You work here? At the hotel?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken judgment. From across the room she felt Callaway watching their interaction, his keen eyes missing. "Nothing, I do," she said simply. "Is there anything you need for the meeting, Mr. Chen? Additional water or coffee?" Alex flinched slightly at her formality. "No, Eliza, you were top of our class. Everyone thought you'd be running Goldman Sachs by now. What happened?" The question was gauche, inappropriate, but she could see genuine bewilderment behind it. To him, her current position was incomprehensible, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. "Life happened," she answered quietly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I should let you prepare for your meeting." "Wait," Alex reached for her arm, then seemed to think. better of it. We should catch up. Are you free after the meeting, maybe lunch? The invitation was equal parts curiosity and pity, neither of which Eliza could stomach. I'm working until 6, but thank you for the offer. Before he could respond, Callaway approached. Chen, the meeting is starting. Ms. Matthews, ensure we're not disturbed. Of course, Mr. Callaway. As she turned to leave, Alex called after her. You were the brightest one there, you know. Everyone said so. The words followed her out of the room, echoing in her mind long after she had returned to her post at the reception desk. Brightest one there. Was. Past tense. Throughout her shift, Eliza moved through her duties mechanically, her mind elsewhere. Checking in guests, arranging transportation, solving minor crises, all while remembering who she had been, who she might have become. Late in the afternoon, the meeting concluded. The executives streamed out of the Sapphire Room toward waiting cars, Alex among them. He glanced toward the reception desk but didn't approach, merely raising his hand in a half-wave that seemed to encompass both greeting and goodbye. Callaway was the last to emerge. Instead of heading for the elevators, he made his way directly to Eliza's desk. Your former classmate speaks highly of you, he said without preamble. He says you had the highest analytical scores Wharton had seen in a decade. Eliza felt heat rise to her face. Mr. Chen exaggerates. I doubt that. I've seen your work. Callaway studied her with that same penetrating gaze. Why are you here, Ms. Matthews? Working at a hotel reception desk? The question was blunt, borderline rude, but there was something in his tone that wasn't judgment so much as genuine curiosity. Sometimes our paths take unexpected turns, she replied carefully. He seemed unsatisfied with her answer but didn't press further. I'll need you to attend tomorrow's meeting as well, 8 a.m. Of course, Mr. Callaway. As he walked away, Eliza realized something had shifted. He had looked at her differently, spoken to her differently, not as a hotel employee, a function, to be used but as a puzzle to be solved. She wasn't sure which was more dangerous. The next morning's meeting was smaller, more intense. Only Callaway and 3 of his top executives huddled around the conference table, deep in discussion about a potential acquisition. Eliza had once again ensured everything was perfect before, attempting to slip away unnoticed. Stay, Callaway said, not looking up from his papers. Not a request. Eliza hesitated by the door. Sir, take notes. The hotel's recording equipment is inadequate, and my assistant is delayed. She moved quietly to a chair in the corner, pulling out the small notepad she always kept in her pocket. The executives barely acknowledged her presence as they continued their heated debate. The valuation is inflated, argued a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses. Microcore's technology platform isn't worth half what they're asking. Their user base alone justifies the price, countered a woman with sharp features and sharper words. 10 million active monthly users we could immediately fold into our ecosystem. Callaway remained silent, watching the debate unfold. Eliza's pen moved swiftly across the page, capturing not just words but the nuances of argument, the hierarchy of concerns, the underlying tensions. The integration costs would be astronomical. Wirerim continued. Their architecture is fundamentally incompatible with our systems, so we rebuild. Sharp Features retorted. The acquisition isn't about their backend. It's about market share and eliminating competition. The third executive, who had been quietly studying spreadsheets, finally spoke. The numbers don't work. Even with aggressive growth projections, we're looking at negative returns for at least 3 years. Callaway's eyes narrowed. Show me. The executives huddled around a financial model projected on the screen, pointing out revenue forecasts, integration costs, market penetration rates. Eliza continued taking notes, her analytical mind automatically processing the information, spotting patterns, seeing connections, and then she saw it. A fundamental flaw in their approach so obvious she almost gasped aloud. Their entire integration strategy was based on a critical misunderstanding of Microcore's technology platform. She bit her lip, focusing intently on her notepad. This wasn't her meeting, her company, her problem. She was here to take notes, to be invisible, to serve coffee, and disappear. But the error was glaring, painful to witness. If Callaway acquired Microcore based on this flawed analysis, the consequences would be disastrous. Millions, perhaps billions, wasted. The debate continued, growing more heated. Wire rim and sharp features were nearly shouting now. The quiet executive looked increasingly uncomfortable, and Callaway watched it all with cold calculation, drawing closer to a decision based on fundamentally flawed premises. Eliza's hand tightened around her pen. She shouldn't speak. It wasn't her place. She was the help, the furniture, the function. The woman who brought water and arranged chairs and smiled politely. Her opinion hadn't been requested. Yet the voice of her former self, the Wharton student, the rising star at Meridian, screamed in her head. Say something. Show them what you know. Excuse me, she heard herself say, the words emerging before she could stop them. The room fell silent. 4 pairs of eyes turned to her, expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance to outright hostility. What is it? Callaway asked, his tone dangerously neutral. Eliza swallowed hard. I believe there may be a misunderstanding about Microcore's technology architecture. Wire Rim looked offended. And you would know this how exactly? I've been taking notes, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. And it seems the integration strategy assumes Microcore's platform is built on a centralized database structure. But their public technical documentation indicates they use a distributed microservices architecture. The silence deepened. Sharp features narrowed her eyes. You read technical documentation for fun, hotel clerk? The dismissive tone stung, but Eliza continued. If I'm correct, the integration costs would be significantly lower than projected, and the timeline shortened by approximately 8 months. That would substantially change the ROI calculations. Wire Rim scoffed. This is absurd. Mr. Callaway, should we really be discussing proprietary acquisition strategies in front of hotel staff? Callaway hadn't taken his eyes off Eliza. Check it, he ordered the quiet executive, who immediately began typing furiously on his laptop. Tense seconds passed. Eliza fought the urge to apologize, to backtrack, to make herself small again. She had crossed a line. Maria's warning echoed in her mind. He doesn't get angry. He erases people. She's right, the quiet executive finally said, looking up from his screen with undisguised surprise. Microcore transitioned to microservices last year. It's right there in their developer documentation. How did we miss this? Wire Rim and sharp features exchanged uncomfortable glances. Callaway's expression remained unreadable. Recalculate the integration costs, he ordered. Ms. Matthews, you may go. Eliza rose, placing her notepad on the table. I apologize for the interruption. As she reached the door, Callaway spoke again. Ms. Matthews, she turned. Yes, Mr. Callaway. Don't apologize for being right. It wasn't praise, not exactly. But as Eliza closed the door behind her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The quiet satisfaction of using her mind to its full capacity, of being seen for what she truly was. She didn't notice Wire Rim watching her through the glass walls of the conference room, his expression darkening with suspicion and resentment. Word spread quickly through the Grand Azure about Eliza's intervention in Callaway's meeting. Not the specifics, but the fact that a mere receptionist had spoken up, corrected executives, and lived to tell the tale. Staff looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern, as though she had diffused a bomb with seconds to spare. You have a death wish, Carlos whispered during their lunch break. Nobody corrects Callaway. Nobody. I just pointed out a fact, Eliza replied, uncomfortable with the attention. Well, your fact made Benson nearly have a stroke, Sarah added, referring to Wire Rim's real name. He was complaining at the bar last night, loudly. Eliza felt a twinge of unease. She had embarrassed one of Callaway's executives, something Maria had specifically warned against. He was drinking at our bar? With that woman executive, the scary one. They were talking about you. Sarah leaned closer. Called you the help and presumptuous. Said Callaway was being too indulgent. For the remainder of her shift, Eliza felt Benson's resentment like a shadow over her shoulder. She had made an enemy, something she couldn't afford in her precarious position. At precisely 6 p.m., As she prepared to end her shift, Mr. Winters approached her desk with a strained expression. "Mr. Callaway has requested your presence in the main restaurant immediately." Eliza's stomach tightened. Did he say why? No, but he's dining with his executive team, the CEO of Microcore. The implications were clear. This was the acquisition target she had discussed in the meeting. She was being summoned to a high-stakes business dinner, completely out of her depth. "Should I change first?" she asked, glancing down at her hotel uniform. He said immediately. Mr. Winters repeated, his tone suggesting delay would be unwise. The Grand Azure's restaurant occupied the hotel's top floor, all floor-to-ceiling windows and crystal chandeliers. Eliza was escorted to a private dining area where Callaway sat at the head of a table surrounded by his team. Benson and Sharp Features were there, along with several unfamiliar faces. One, a jovial man with silver hair, must be Microcore's CEO. All. Conversation stopped as she entered. 7 pairs of eyes turned to her, ranging from curious to hostile. "Ms. Matthews," Callaway acknowledged. "Join us." There was an empty chair near the foot of the table. Eliza took it, acutely aware of her uniform amid their business attire, of her position amid their power. Ms. Matthews provided some insight. "On Microcore's architecture yesterday," Callaway told the silver-haired man. "It proved useful in our preliminary discussions." Silverhair beamed at her. "Wonderful. Always good to have technically informed perspectives." Benson's face darkened. "Ms. Matthews is a hotel receptionist, Frank, not part of our technical team." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Silverhair looked confused. Sharp Features smirked behind her wine glass. "A receptionist?" Silverhair repeated, as though he hadn't heard correctly. "Yes," Benson continued, his voice carrying clearly. "She was serving coffee during our meeting and took it upon herself to interrupt with her opinions." Eliza kept her expression neutral, though she felt heat rising to her face. "I was taking notes, actually." "Taking notes," Benson mimicked with a slight sneer. "And somehow, an entry-level hotel employee believes she understands enterprise software architecture better than senior executives with decades of experience." The table grew quieter still. Callaway watched the exchange without expression, making no move to intervene. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about my role here tonight," Eliza said carefully. "I should return to my duties." "No misunderstanding at all," Benson replied before Callaway could speak. "We're simply establishing appropriate boundaries. You don't belong at this table discussing matters you can't possibly comprehend. You don't belong in our meetings interrupting professionals. In fact," his voice rose slightly, "you don't belong behind that reception desk pretending to be something you're not." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. A direct challenge not just to Eliza, but to Callaway's judgment in including her. Eliza met Benson's gaze calmly, though her heart raced. This was the moment Maria had warned her about. The powerful man feeling threatened, ready to erase her with a word. She had 2 choices: retreat into her role as the apologetic hotel employee, or stand her ground. The Grand Azure receptionist would apologize, but the woman who had once been destined for a corner office at Meridian wouldn't back down. She straightened her spine, took a breath, and prepared to defend herself. Little did she know this confrontation would change the course of her life forever. The silence around the table thickened as Eliza looked directly into Benson's eyes. The man clearly expected her to crumble, to apologize, to slink away. Everyone waited for her response, the tension building with each passing second. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Benson," Eliza said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I don't belong behind that reception desk." Benson's thin lips curved into a victorious smile. Sharp Features leaned back in her chair, satisfied. Silverhair looked uncomfortable, glancing between them and Callaway, who remained inscrutable. But Eliza wasn't finished. "I don't belong there because I graduated summa cum laude from Cornell with dual degrees in economics and business administration, was accepted to Wharton's MBA program with a merit scholarship, and spent 2 years at Meridian Consulting, specializing in tech sector analysis and market entry strategy." The smile faded from Benson's face. Confusion flickered across Sharp Features' expression. "I've analyzed software architecture integration for companies larger than yours, Mr. Benson. I've developed valuation models for tech acquisitions worth billions, and I correctly identified that your integration cost projections for microcore were inflated by approximately 40% due to a fundamental misunderstanding of their current architecture. She paused, aware that she had crossed a point of no return. Every eye at the table was fixed on her now, including Callaway's penetrating gaze. So no, I don't belong behind that reception desk. But neither do you belong in an acquisition meeting where you're about to recommend overpaying by millions for a company whose basic technical infrastructure you don't understand. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Benson's face had gone from red to white. Sharp features sat frozen, wine glass halfway to her lips. The quiet executive from yesterday's meeting was looking at Eliza with newfound respect. Silver hair broke the silence with a low whistle. Well, he said, turning to Callaway, your team is certainly thorough in their vetting. For the first time since she had met him, James Callaway smiled. A small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips, but unmistakably a smile. Frank, he addressed Silver Hair, would you excuse us for a moment? I'd like a private word with my team. Silver Hair nodded, pushing back from the table. Of course, I'll wait at the bar. When he had gone, Callaway turned to Benson. Is she correct about the architecture? Benson sputtered. Sir, the absolute presumption of this hotel clerk to speak to me this way. Answer the question. Callaway cut him off. Is her assessment accurate? The quiet executive spoke up. It is, sir. I verified it yesterday after the meeting. We would have been overestimating integration costs by 38%. And no one on my highly paid executive team caught this except Ms. Matthews. Callaway stated flatly. No one responded. Eliza sat perfectly still, awaiting judgment. She had just publicly humiliated one of Callaway's top executives. Career suicide under normal circumstances. But these were far from normal circumstances. Ms. Matthews, Callaway finally addressed her directly. Why are you working as a receptionist? The question was blunt, unexpected. Eliza hesitated, then answered simply. Family obligations required me to leave my previous career. The grand Azure was hiring. Callaway nodded once as if confirming something to himself. You'll join us for the remainder of the dinner. Benson, move down one seat. Benson looked as though he might protest, then thought better of it. He moved, allowing Eliza to take a seat closer to Callaway. And Ms. Matthews, Callaway added as Silver Hair was waved back in, I expect a full explanation of your background after dinner. In private, yes, sir, she replied, recognizing both the opportunity and the risk in his words. As the dinner resumed, with conversation gradually returning to normal, Eliza caught fragments of whispered exchange between Benson and Sharp Features. Can't believe he's allowing this, and watch yourself, David. He's clearly impressed. Background check first thing tomorrow. Eliza maintained her composure, participating in the business discussion when addressed, offering insights when appropriate. But inside, her mind raced. In a single sentence, she had revealed her true self, burned her carefully constructed bridges, and potentially set herself on a new path, or dug her own professional grave. Only time and James Callaway would determine which. The remainder of the dinner passed in a blur. Eliza found herself answering questions about Microcore's market position, offering observations on integration strategies, and even discussing potential synergies between product lines. It was surreal, sitting at a table of executives in her hotel uniform, being treated as an equal by everyone except Benson, who radiated cold fury from his demoted position. By the time dessert arrived, Silver Hair was addressing his comments directly to her. You have remarkable insight for someone who hasn't seen our proprietary systems, he noted. I follow tech industry developments closely, Eliza replied carefully. Your company's innovations in distributed computing architecture have been featured in several industry publications. As the dinner concluded and executives began to depart, Mr. Winters appeared at the entrance to the private dining room, his face pale with concern. He beckoned urgently to Eliza. What were you thinking? He hissed when she approached. The hotel manager is having a fit. You can't just abandon your post to dine with guests. Mr. Callaway requested my presence, Eliza explained. Even so. There. Our protocols, boundaries. Winters ran a hand through his thinning hair. Mrs. Garland wants to see you immediately. Mrs. Garland was the hotel manager, a formidable woman who rarely interacted with staff below department head level. Being summoned to her office was never positive. Mr. Callaway asked me to meet with him after dinner, Eliza said. Well now, you have competing demands from a guest and your employer, Winters replied, and only one of them signs your paycheck. The choice seemed clear, until Callaway materialized beside them, having overheard the exchange. Mr. Winters, isn't it? He addressed the assistant manager directly. Yes, sir. Maxwell Winters, at your service. Ms. Matthews will be joining me for a business discussion. Please inform Mrs. Garland that any concerns regarding Ms. Matthews's schedule can be directed to me personally. Winters blanched. But sir, Mrs. Garland is quite insistent. So am I, Callaway replied, his tone making clear which insistence would prevail. As Winters hurried away, Eliza realized she was witnessing firsthand what Maria had described. Callaway's power to shape reality around him with just a few words. The same power that could erase people could also, apparently, protect them. Come, Callaway directed her toward the elevators. We'll talk in my suite. The presidential suite looked different at night, the floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the glittering city below. Callaway led her to the sitting area, gesturing for her to take a seat while he poured himself a scotch. Drink? He offered. No, thank you. He settled into an armchair across from her, studying her with that same penetrating gaze. You're in a complicated situation, Ms. Matthews. I'm aware. Benson is already looking for ways to discredit you. The hotel management wants to discipline you, and I'm still deciding what to make of you. Eliza met his gaze directly. Which concerns you the most? A flicker of something, almost amusement, crossed his face. That's the right question. He sipped his scotch. Tell me your story, the real one this time. She did. The full narrative she had avoided for years. Cornell, Meridian, Wharton, her mother's illness, the impossible medical bills, the choice between career and family. The slow drift from promising professional to whatever she was now. Callaway listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he remained silent for a long moment. Your mother has passed? The question surprised her. Yes, 2 years ago. And you've been working service jobs since? Yes, why not return to your field? With your qualifications, even with the gap, I tried, Eliza admitted. But there were obstacles, financial ones primarily. I depleted my savings during my mother's illness. I have substantial debt. My professional connections had moved on. And explaining a 5-year absence to recruiters proved challenging. Callaway nodded slowly. Life's timing can be merciless. The observation, so simply stated yet profound, caught her off guard. It was the first hint that beneath his calculating exterior might exist something resembling empathy. What happens now? She asked. That depends on several factors. He set down his glass. Benson has already contacted HR to run a background check on you. He's hoping to find evidence that you've misrepresented yourself. He won't. I know. I had you vetted the day after you corrected my presentation. At her surprised look, he added, I'm thorough, Ms. Matthews. You of all people should appreciate that. He stood, moving to the window to gaze at the city below. The hotel will almost certainly terminate your employment after tonight's events. Maintaining hierarchy is paramount in hospitality. Eliza felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Unemployment was not something she could afford, not with her debt burden. Unless, Callaway continued, someone were to intervene, someone like you. He turned to face her. I find myself in need of someone with your particular combination of skills and insight, someone who sees what others miss. The implication hung in the air between them. A job offer, a lifeline, a completely new direction. Consider your options carefully, Ms. Matthews. We'll speak again tomorrow. It was a dismissal, polite but firm. As Eliza rose to leave, she knew that whatever happened next would irrevocably change the course of her life. Eliza didn't sleep. How could she? Her mind raced through possibilities, consequences, futures that might unfold from this unexpected turning point. By dawn, she had considered every angle, every potential outcome. When her alarm chimed at 5 a.m., she was already dressed and ready. The Grand Azure's lobby felt different as she entered. The familiar space now charged with uncertain potential. The night manager avoided her gaze. A security officer watched her with unusual attention. Her access card still worked, but for how long? A note waited at the reception desk. Report to Mrs. Garland's office. 8 a.m. She had 3 hours to prepare for her probable termination. 3 hours to decide what she would say to Callaway when he inevitably made his offer. 3 hours to determine the course of her future. Eliza worked her shift with mechanical precision, checking in early departures, arranging transportation, answering inquiries. If this was to be her last morning at the Grand Azure, she would leave with her professional dignity intact. At precisely 7:59 a.m., she knocked on Mrs. Garland's office door. "Enter," came the clipped response. Mrs. Garland sat behind an immaculate her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, her expression equally severe. To Eliza's surprise, Mr. Winters was also present, standing uncomfortably by the window. "Ms. Matthews," Mrs. Garland began without preamble, "I've received concerning reports about your behavior yesterday evening, abandoning your post, inserting yourself into a guest's private business dinner, speaking out of turn, contradicting a guest directly." Each accusation landed like a small stone. Eliza remained silent, aware that no defense would suffice. This represents a serious breach of hotel protocol and professional boundaries. "Yes, ma'am. Under normal circumstances, immediate termination would be the only appropriate response." Eliza noted the qualifier. "Under normal circumstances." "I understand." Mrs. Garland's expression tightened. "However, the circumstances are far from normal. Mr. Callaway called me personally at 6:30 this morning, so he had intervened, as implied." Eliza waited, curious what form this intervention had taken. "He was quite insistent that no disciplinary action be taken against you. In fact," Mrs. Garland looked physically pained to continue, "he threatened to withdraw all Callaway innovations, business from our hotel if you were to be terminated, or even reprimanded." Mr. Winters shifted uncomfortably. "Callaway Innovations represents nearly 15% of our corporate bookings annually." "I'm aware of the figures, Maxwell," Mrs. Garland snapped. She refocused on Eliza. "So I find myself in an unprecedented position. I cannot terminate you without significant financial damage to this hotel, yet I cannot allow such a blatant violation of protocol to go unaddressed." "I understand your predicament," Eliza said carefully. "Do you?" Mrs. Garland leaned forward. "Because from where I sit, it appears you've leveraged a guest's influence to circumvent proper management authority. A dangerous precedent. The accusation was unfair, but not entirely incorrect." Eliza had not sought Callaway's protection, but she had benefited from it. "That was not my intention," she replied. "Intentions matter less than appearances, Ms. Matthews, and the appearance is troubling." Before Eliza could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Without waiting for permission, the door opened to reveal James Callaway himself. "Mrs. Garland," he acknowledged the manager with a brief nod. "I'll need Ms. Matthews now." The room fell into stunned silence. Mrs. Garland recovered first. "Mr. Callaway, we're in the middle of a personnel matter, which I believe I addressed in our call this morning." His tone was pleasant but unyielding. "Ms. Matthews?" Eliza glanced between them, caught in the crossfire of power dynamics beyond her control. "Mrs. Garland and I were just finishing our discussion." "Good." Callaway remained in the doorway, clearly expecting her to follow. Mrs. Garland's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll continue this conversation later, Ms. Matthews." Eliza nodded and rose, following Callaway out of the office and through the lobby toward the elevators. Hotel staff watched with undisguised curiosity. She could already imagine the whispers, the speculation. "You didn't need to intervene," she said once they were alone in the elevator. "I disagree. It creates complications. Life is complications, Ms. Matthews. Success is navigating them effectively." The elevator doors opened directly into the presidential suite. To Eliza's surprise, the living area had been transformed into an impromptu office, with laptops, documents, and coffee arranged on the dining table. One of Callaway's assistants worked quietly in the corner. "I've reviewed your background in detail." Callaway began without preamble. Cornell transcript, performance reviews from Meridian, recommendations from professors at Wharton, all exceptional. Eliza blinked, surprised at the thoroughness of his investigation. You've been busy. I'm efficient. He gestured for her to sit. I'm prepared to offer you a position at Callaway Innovations, special advisor to the CEO, focusing on strategic acquisitions and competitive analysis. Starting salary $300,000 with performance bonuses and relocation assistance to our San Francisco headquarters. The offer was direct, substantial, life-changing. Yet something in his delivery struck Eliza as rehearsed, as though he had made similar offers many times before. Why? She asked simply. Callaway raised an eyebrow. Your qualifications are evident. There are thousands of qualified analysts with prestigious degrees and no employment gaps. Why me? He studied her for a moment. You see what others miss. You speak truth regardless of consequence. Those qualities are rare and valuable. Those qualities got me into trouble yesterday, only with people who fear truth. He leaned forward, slightly. I don't. The offer hung between them, tempting in its potential. A return to the career trajectory she had abandoned. Financial security, professional respect. Everything she had once dreamed of. Yet something held her back. A question unformed but persistent. About what this opportunity would truly mean. About who she would become if she accepted. I need time to consider, she said finally. Callaway looked genuinely surprised, perhaps for the first time since she had met him. Most people would accept immediately. I'm not most people, Mr. Callaway. That's why you made the offer. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. 24 hours. Ms. Matthews, I depart the day after tomorrow. As Eliza left the suite, her mind already racing through this new set of possibilities, she realized that whatever choice she made, it would be hers alone. Not dictated by circumstance or necessity, but by her own determination of what her future should be. For the first time in years, she had options. The power of choice had returned to her life, unexpected and profound. The Grand Azure hummed with whispers as Eliza moved through her shift. News of her confrontation with Benson, of Callaway's intervention with management, of her mysterious meeting in the presidential suite had spread through the staff with the speed of wildfire. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged her for months now watched her with undisguised curiosity. Is it true? Carlos cornered her in the break room. Did Callaway offer you a job? How did you hear that? Eliza asked, surprised at the accuracy of the rumor mill. Carlos grinned. His assistant was bragging to the bartender. Said Callaway never makes offers personally unless it's something big. Eliza sighed. Hotel confidentiality apparently didn't extend to billionaires' business dealings. It's complicated. Complicated. Maria joined them, concern evident in her weathered face. What's complicated about escaping this place for a real career? Take the money and run, girl. The advice was well-intentioned but oversimplified. Eliza had spent her lunch break researching Callaway Innovations more thoroughly. Beyond the surface-level knowledge she already possessed, the company was undeniably successful, revolutionary even, but its corporate culture reflected its founder. Brilliant, demanding, ruthlessly efficient. Former employees described an environment where results trumped everything, where 60-hour weeks were standard, where those who couldn't maintain the pace were quickly discarded. Working for Callaway is like strapping yourself to a rocket, one review read. Exhilarating until you burn out. Was that what she wanted? To re-enter the corporate world at its most intense level? To work directly with a man known for his uncompromising standards and coldly analytical approach to everything, including people, as her shift ended. Mr. Winters approached her desk with obvious discomfort. Mrs. Garland would like to continue your discussion from this morning. Eliza nodded, having expected this. The hotel management wouldn't simply accept Callaway's intervention without reasserting some control over the situation. Mrs. Garland's office seemed smaller in the afternoon light. The woman herself somehow diminished after Callaway's casual dismissal of her authority. Sit down, Ms. Matthews, she said, her tone carefully neutral. I understand Mr. Callaway has offered you a position with his company. News traveled even faster than Eliza had realized. Yes, ma'am. And will you be accepting this offer? I haven't decided. Mrs. Garland looked genuinely surprised. I see. Well, regardless of your decision, we need to address your continued employment here. Here it comes, Eliza thought. The carefully worded termination that wouldn't trigger Callaway's threat. The incident yesterday represented a serious breach of protocol, Mrs. Garland continued. However, it has also forced me to review your personnel file more carefully. She opened a folder on her desk. 3 months of exemplary performance. Views, multiple guest commendations, operational suggestions that have improved efficiency. You're clearly overqualified for your position, Ms. Matthews. This wasn't the conversation Eliza had expected. Thank you? It's not a compliment. It's an observation. Mrs. Garland closed the folder. The Grand Azure values appropriate fit. The right person in the right role. You are, quite evidently, in the wrong role. Are you firing me, Mrs. Garland? No, I'm offering you a choice. She leaned forward. You can accept Mr. Callaway's offer and depart with our blessing, or you can accept a promotion to Assistant Manager of Guest Relations, with appropriate salary adjustment and career development opportunities. The counteroffer was unexpected. Not nearly as lucrative as Callaway's, but significant nonetheless. A step up, a path forward within the world she had come to know. Why? Eliza asked, echoing the same question she had posed to Callaway. Because talent should be recognized, Mrs. Garland replied simply, even when it manifests in unconventional ways. As Eliza left the office, her decision had only grown more complex. 2 paths now stretched before her, each with its own potential, its own challenges, its own vision of who she might become. Back in her apartment that evening, she returned to the bottom drawer, to the remnants of her former self, the acceptance, letter from Wharton, the performance reviews from Meridian, the photographs of a younger, more confident Eliza Matthews. What would you do? She asked that other self. That ghost of possibilities interrupted. The answer came not in words, but in a feeling, a certainty that had been building since the moment she had stood her ground against Benson. Whatever choice she made, it would be on her terms, not Callaway's, not Mrs. Garland's, hers alone. Morning arrived with the clarity that sometimes follows a sleepless night. Eliza dressed with particular care, selecting her one good suit, preserved from her Meridian days. Today would not be an ordinary day at the reception desk. Today would be a day of decisions. The Grand Azure's lobby sparkled in the early light as she crossed it, not toward her usual post, but directly to the elevators. Staff watched her pass, noting the suit, the determined stride, the absence of the customary uniform. Callaway answered her knock on the presidential suite door himself, already dressed and working despite the early hour. He assessed her appearance with a quick glance. "You've made your decision," he stated. "I have questions first," Eliza replied. He gestured her inside. The suite had returned to its normal configuration, the impromptu office dismantled. "Proceed. What exactly would my role entail?" She took a seat, maintaining eye contact. "Special advisor is deliberately vague. You would analyze potential acquisitions, identify market opportunities, and provide strategic recommendations directly to me." He remained standing, a subtle power play she recognized but didn't challenge. "Your background in tech sector analysis makes you well suited for this function. And my reporting structure? You would report only to me." Eliza nodded, having expected this. Work location, initially San Francisco headquarters. Eventually travel to target companies and markets. Hours and expectations? A slight pause. "We don't track hours at my level. Results are what matter." Translation: endless work with no boundaries, exactly as the employee reviews had suggested. "And Benson?" she asked. "Where would he fall in this structure?" Callaway's expression remained neutral. "He would be a colleague, not a superior. A resentful colleague who believes I humiliated him publicly. Office politics are inevitable in any organization, Ms. Matthews. I would expect you to navigate them professionally." "As you navigate them?" she countered. "By threatening hotel management when they attempt to discipline an employee who broke protocol?" His eyes narrowed slightly, the first sign her questions were penetrating his composed exterior. "I protect valuable assets." "Assets," she repeated. "Not people." Semantics. "No, Mr. Callaway. Philosophy, worldview. the lens through which you perceive others. Eliza leaned forward. I've researched your company extensively. Brilliant innovation, revolutionary products, extraordinary growth, and a turnover rate nearly triple the industry average. He didn't deny it. Excellence demands sacrifice. Whose sacrifice? The executives with golden parachutes or the employees who burn out after 3 years? The conversation had shifted from job interview to something more fundamental, and they both knew it. This wasn't just about a position, it was about values, about the kind of life she wanted to build. What exactly are you asking, Ms. Matthews? I'm asking what kind of person I would need to become to succeed in your organization. Would I need to view colleagues as competition, employees as functions, people as assets? Would I need to adopt your approach to power and influence? Callaway studied her with that penetrating gaze, but for once, he seemed to be considering his response carefully. You're describing effectiveness in a highly competitive industry. I'm describing a choice, Eliza replied. One I made once before. When I left my career to care for my mother, I chose human connection over professional advancement then. I'm trying to determine if your offer requires the opposite choice now. Something shifted in his expression. A brief glimpse of understanding. Perhaps even respect. You believe there's a contradiction between success and humanity? I believe there's a contradiction between how you operate and who I want to be. The words hung between them, honest in a way that corporate interactions rarely are. Eliza hadn't planned this confrontation, but now that it was happening, she recognized its importance. This wasn't just about a job offer. It was about reclaiming her voice, her values, her agency. Callaway moved to the window, looking out at the city below. When he spoke again, his tone had changed subtly. The offer remains open, Ms. Matthews. 300,000 base reporting. Directly to me, San Francisco relocation. Thank you, but I'll need to propose some modifications. He turned, genuine surprise evident. Modifications? Yes, Eliza said, rising to her feet. I have some terms of my own to discuss. When you're ready to hear them, you know where to find me. She walked to the door, feeling strangely light. Whatever happened next, she had stood her ground, maintained her integrity, spoken her truth. As she reached for the handle, Callaway's voice stopped her. Few people walk away from me, Ms. Matthews. She turned back. I'm not walking away. I'm inviting you to meet me halfway. The door closed behind her, with a soft click that somehow felt like the turning of a page. Eliza's shift at the reception desk that day felt surreal. Checking in guests, arranging services, solving minor crises, all while carrying the weight of her conversation with Callaway. She had walked away from a life-changing offer, or at least, placed it in limbo. The old Eliza would have called it madness. The new Eliza recognized it as necessary. Mrs. Garland summoned her mid-afternoon. Have you reached a decision regarding our offer? She asked without preamble. Not yet, Eliza replied. I'm still considering all options, including Callaway's? Yes, Mrs. Garland sighed. I can't match his salary, Ms. Matthews. I was quite clear about that. This isn't just about money, Eliza assured her. It's about fit, as you said yourself. The right person in the right role. Something in her tone must have conveyed her sincerity, because Mrs. Garland nodded slowly. Very well, but I'll need your answer by tomorrow. We have staffing decisions to make. The hours ticked by without word from Callaway. Eliza hadn't truly expected him to respond to her challenge immediately. Men in his position weren't accustomed to negotiating with hotel receptionists, even former Wharton students with dual degrees. As her shift neared its end, Mr. Winters approached her desk with a familiar mix of discomfort and resignation. Mr. Callaway has requested your presence. In the main restaurant. Déjà vu swept over her. Another summons, another confrontation. But this time she was prepared. The restaurant was nearly empty at the awkward hour between lunch and dinner. Callaway sat alone at a corner table, a single folder before him. He didn't rise as she approached. Ms. Matthews, he acknowledged her with a nod. Please sit. She did, noting the subtle shift in his demeanor. Less commanding, more contemplative. I've been reviewing your performance evaluations from Meridian, he began, opening the folder. Your supervisor noted your Exceptional ability to reframe problems into opportunities. An interesting observation. Marcus was a generous mentor. Eliza replied, surprised that he had dug so deeply into her past. He also noted your refreshing directness and willingness to challenge established thinking, traits that would have eventually earned you a partnership in his estimation. Before life intervened. Yes. Callaway closed the folder. You said you had terms to discuss. I'm listening. The moment of truth. Eliza straightened her spine, met his gaze directly. Remote work options, based in this city where I've established my life, 45-hour work week maximum, with exceptions for genuine emergencies only. Direct reporting to you, but with clear boundaries regarding availability and response times. Callaway's expression remained carefully neutral. That contradicts our established corporate culture. Then perhaps your culture needs evolution, Mr. Callaway. Burnout isn't a badge of honor. It's a failure of leadership. The words were bold, perhaps too bold. But they were honest, and honesty was what she had promised herself. Continue, he said after a moment. A commitment to mentorship, not just for me, but for junior staff. People leave organizations like yours because they're treated as functions rather than humans with potential. I want to help change that. You want to reform my company's culture as a condition of joining it, Callaway stated, a hint of incredulity in his tone. I want to help improve it, Eliza corrected. Your technical innovation is unparalleled. Your human systems could benefit from similar creativity. A silence fell between them. Callaway studied her with that penetrating gaze. But now she recognized something else in it. Calculation, yes, but also genuine consideration. Why do you care about mentorship? He finally asked. Because someone once cared about me, she answered. Simply, my professors at Cornell, my supervisors at Meridian, they saw potential and nurtured it. That's how talent grows. And you believe this approach is compatible with high performance? I believe it's essential for sustainable high performance. Your current model produces brilliant work at the cost of constant turnover. Imagine what those same brilliant minds could accomplish with proper support and reasonable boundaries. Callaway leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Your counter-proposal is unorthodox. So was hiring a hotel receptionist as a special advisor, Eliza pointed out. You already recognize the value of unconventional approaches, Mr. Callaway. I'm simply suggesting we extend that thinking to how we work, not just who does the work. We, he noted. You're already thinking from inside the organization. I'm considering the possibility, she acknowledged. But only on terms that align with my values. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. You negotiate surprisingly well for someone who's been checking in hotel guests for 3 months. I negotiate exactly as well as someone who graduated summa cum laude from Cornell and was on track for partnership at Meridian, she countered. The front desk was my location, not my limitation. For the second time since their acquaintance began, James Callaway smiled. A real smile that transformed his usually calculating features into something almost warm. Ms. Matthews, he said, extending his hand across the table. I believe we have terms to discuss. As she shook his hand, Eliza felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a job negotiation. It was a reclamation of her power, her worth, her future. On her terms, not his. Not merely accepting what was offered, but shaping it into something better. The balance had shifted, perhaps irrevocably. 1 month later, Eliza sat in her new office reviewing acquisition proposals with the same meticulous attention she had once given to hotel guest preferences. The space was modest by Callaway innovation standards, but it had a window with a view of the city she had refused to leave. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Mentorship meeting, 2 p.m. A smile touched her lips. The program had been her first initiative, pairing junior analysts with senior staff for regular guidance sessions. Initially met with skepticism, it was already showing promising results in engagement metrics and project quality. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Callaway himself stood in the doorway, as impeccably dressed as always, but somehow less forbidding than he had seemed at the Grand Azure. The microcore integration report, he said, placing a folder on her desk. Your analysis was correct. 38% savings on integration costs compared to initial projections. The team did excellent work, Eliza replied, giving credit where it was due. Under your guidance. He remained standing, his posture slightly less rigid than in their early encounters. The board was impressed. They've approved the mentorship, program, budget expansion you requested. That's excellent news, thank you. Don't thank me. It was your presentation that convinced them. He glanced at the photographs she had placed on her desk. One of her mother, another of her Cornell graduation. The quarterly review is next week. I expect you'll be presenting the strategic acquisition roadmap. I'll be prepared. He nodded, turning to leave, then paused. Benson submitted his resignation this morning. The news wasn't entirely surprising. David Benson had made his resentment of Eliza's presence clear from day one, undermining her ideas. In meetings, questioning her authority with junior staff. I see. He cited philosophical differences with the company's new direction, Callaway added, a hint of irony in his tone. Translation. He couldn't adapt to the cultural shifts Eliza had begun implementing with Callaway's support. The emphasis on collaboration over competition, the recognition of work-life boundaries, the valuing of diverse perspectives in decision-making. His contributions were significant, Eliza said diplomatically. He'll be missed, Callaway raised, an eyebrow clearly doubting her sincerity. The position of VP Strategic Development will need to be filled. The implication hung in the air between them. A promotion already after just 1 month. The fast track that had once been her trajectory before life intervened. I appreciate the vote of confidence, she said carefully, but I believe I'm most effective in my current role for now. The mentorship program needs stability to take root, and I've only just established relationships with the acquisition team. Surprise flickered across Callaway's face. Few in his organization had ever declined. Advancement opportunities. Your choice, he said after a moment. The position will remain open when you're ready. After he left, Eliza turned to the window, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past month, the tearful goodbyes at the Grand Azure, where staff had gathered to wish her well. Mrs. Garland's grudging admission that Eliza had found her proper place. Carlos's joking demand for VIP treatment whenever he visited San Francisco. The transition hadn't been seamless. Some at Callaway Innovations viewed her with suspicion. The hotel receptionist mysteriously elevated to the executive track. Others resented the changes she advocated, the questioning of how things have always been done. Benson had been merely the most vocal opponent, but there were allies too. The quiet executive, now revealed as Thomas Chen, had become a valuable collaborator. The junior analysts who flourished under the mentorship program, and most surprisingly, Callaway himself, who had proven more adaptable than his reputation suggested. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Sarah at the Grand Azure. The new guy at the desk is hopeless. Miss you. P.S. Callaway booked the presidential suite again next month. Coincidence? Eliza smiled. Not coincidence at all. Their new working relationship included bi-weekly in-person strategy sessions, alternating between her office and his travels. Callaway was a man of patterns and preferences. Of course, he would stay at the Grand Azure when in town. As she gathered her materials for the mentorship meeting, Eliza caught her reflection in the window glass. She looked different somehow, not just the professional attire that had replaced her hotel uniform, but something in her posture, her expression. The woman who had once felt invisible behind a reception desk now moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had reclaimed her place in it, not the place others had chosen for her, not the place circumstances had forced upon her, but the place she had created for herself, through courage and conviction, and the willingness to speak her truth. A new beginning, on her own terms. 6 months later, Eliza stood in the lobby of the Grand Azure, experiencing the strange sensation of being a guest in a place she had once known intimately as staff. The marble floors gleamed as they always had. The crystal chandeliers cast the same elegant light. But she saw it all from a different perspective now. Ms. Matthews, welcome back. Carlos embraced her warmly, abandoning concierge protocol. Or should I say Vice President Matthews now? Eliza laughed. Just Eliza is fine, Carlos. How are you? Same old? Same old, though Mrs. Garland has been almost pleasant since they promoted her to regional manager. Almost. They chatted briefly about hotel gossip, old colleagues, new developments. Carlos had finally been promoted to head concierge. Maria was retiring next month after 25 years of service. The Grand Azure had been selected for a prestigious industry award, partly based on its innovative staff development program, inspired by Mrs. Garland's promotion of Eliza. Your influence lives on, Carlos told her with a grin. Hardly, Eliza demurred. I was just passing through. Some people pass through without leaving a trace. Others change everything. He glanced toward the entrance. Speaking of which, your boss just arrived. Callaway entered the lobby with his usual commanding presence, though Eliza noted subtle differences from their first encounter. He acknowledged the doorman by name. He waited patiently as a family with small children navigated the revolving door ahead of him. Small things, perhaps insignificant to most observers, but telling to someone who knew him well. Mr. Callaway, welcome back to the Grand Azure. Carlos greeted him professionally. Thank you, Carlos. I trust our usual arrangements have been made? Of course, sir. And as you requested, the conference room is prepared for tomorrow's meeting with the potential investors. Eliza raised an eyebrow at Callaway as they walked toward the elevators. You remembered his name. I remember relevant information, Callaway replied. But there was a hint of self-awareness in his tone that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. The presidential suite looked exactly as it had the night he had summoned her to fix his presentation, though now she entered as a colleague, rather than a service provider. The power dynamic had shifted, equalized by her proven value and his grudging respect for her perspective. The acquisition proposal is ready for review, she said, extracting documents from her briefcase. The target company exceeds all our parameters for market position and technological compatibility. But, Callaway prompted, recognizing her hesitation, but their corporate culture is problematic. High turnover, poor reviews from former employees, allegations of a toxic work environment. 6 months ago, such concerns would have been irrelevant to Callaway's acquisition strategy. Numbers, market share, technology, these were the only metrics that mattered. But something had changed, not just in Eliza's position, but in the company's approach. Your recommendation? He asked, taking a seat across from her. Proceed with caution. Include cultural assessment in our due diligence. Make integration planning and cultural alignment part of the negotiation process from the beginning. Callaway nodded, accepting her analysis without challenge. Draft the terms accordingly. As they worked through the details, Eliza marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From Cornell graduate to hotel receptionist to vice president at one of the world's most innovative companies, a path no career counselor would have charted, with detours and obstacles that had seemed insurmountable at the time. Yet here she was. You're distracted, Callaway noted, always observant. Just reflecting, she admitted. 6 months ago, I was standing behind that reception desk, and you were checking in as a guest I was supposed to serve without question. And instead you questioned everything. He replied dryly, including me. Especially you. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that develops between people who have moved beyond initial impressions to genuine understanding, not friendship exactly. Callaway wasn't built for such connections, but mutual respect, hard-won and valuable. Why? Did you accept my revised offer? Eliza asked suddenly. You could have found dozens of qualified analysts who wouldn't have demanded changes to your corporate culture. Callaway considered the question with his usual precision. Because you were right, he finally said. About the culture, about sustainability, about the cost of treating people as functions rather than assets with potential. Coming from him, it was an extraordinary admission. That must have been difficult to acknowledge. Evolution often is, but those who can't adapt become obsolete. He closed the folder before him. Your mentorship program has reduced turnover by 22% in 6 months. The work-life boundaries you insisted upon have improved productivity metrics across all departments. Your insistence on being treated as a human with value beyond your function has proven economically sound. Eliza smiled at his characteristic translation of human concerns into business metrics. Some things hadn't changed. So I've earned my keep. More than that, he replied seriously. You've changed how we operate. Not just you and me, but the entire organization. The conversation shifted to practical matters. Tomorrow's investor meeting, upcoming product launches, strategic priorities for the next quarter. But Eliza carried his words with her, recognizing their significance coming from a man who rarely offered praise. Later, as she prepared for dinner, she gazed out the window at the city below, remembering her mother's favorite saying, "Sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home." Her path had been circuitous, marked by sacrifice and setback. But standing here now, she wouldn't change it. Every detour had shaped her, strengthened her, prepared her for this moment. Even the months behind the reception desk had taught her invaluable lessons about dignity, perception, and the courage to speak truth to power. One sentence had changed everything. "You don't belong behind that desk." Benson had meant it as an insult, a dismissal of her worth. Instead, it had become the catalyst for her redemption, spoken in a moment of confrontation that had revealed her true self to the world and, more importantly, to herself. She didn't belong behind that desk. She belonged exactly where she was. Now, standing in her power, valued for her mind, changing an organization from within. The longest way around had indeed led her home. If you've been silenced, underestimated, or forced by life's circumstances to take a detour from your dreams, remember Eliza's story. Your education, talents, and potential remain within you, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Sometimes it takes just one sentence, one moment of courage to reclaim your voice and change your path. Like this video, if Eliza's journey resonated with you, share it with someone who might need this reminder of their own worth, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove resilience always finds a way. Your own moment of redemption might be closer than you think.